Hello and welcome back to another video in the Complete Web Dev series. In this chapter, we're building a content management system as an excuse to learn object-oriented programming. And so we're at a point in the project where we've gotten our dynamic routing done by the URL, and we're using pretty URLs to do that. Before we go too much further though, we're going to have to do a little bit more of the complex stuff that we're going to have to do in the project, which is interacting with the database. So the goal is we need to be able to interact with our database in a safe way to prevent SQL injection, and we also want to do it in such a way that it provides a more streamlined, easy way for us to do it while building the project. And sometimes when you need to make something easier to work with, it's a little more complex up front. And that is kind of the example of the entire project we're working on. But let's go ahead and let's start building out our database integrations in this video. So if you're enjoying this series so far, please comment, like, subscribe. Let me know if you have any questions. Also look in the comment section if anybody's struggling. Help me out, answer questions, guys. All right, let's build an awesome community here. So I'm gonna switch over to my screen here, and let's just go ahead and set up a Git branch for me to work on, just so that you guys will have whatever we end up with at the end of this video. You can see that complete change on the GitHub repo. You'll be able to find that in the description down below. So I'm going to check out a new branch here. Oh wow, maybe I should wake up a little bit. All right, git checkout -b, and we'll do v13, and then I'm going to do a git push -- set upstream, and we'll set that to origin v13, and I'll hit enter. All right, now we've got a new branch set up and we are ready to rock and roll. So let's jump over here to our code. I think the only file that we need open right now is this blog controller, and we're just gonna do all of our basic stuff and testing here in this blog controller, but we're gonna set up some new files. And so in order to do that, go ahead and go down to your core directory here and right click on it, and we're gonna add a new file. And this file we're adding is going to be db, and generally we just start the class name with a uppercase, but if it's like only 2 letters, I tend to make both of them uppercase. So that's the only time I break that that naming convention where it's 1 or 2. I don't ever make a class with 1 letter. Well, that's not true. We're going to in this series actually, but I'll hit enter here. Now we have a class or a file rather, that we're going to create a class in to work with our database. So all of our database stuff is going to be right here. And what's really cool about this is we're going to be able to take this file and literally use it in any PHP project that you're using PDO with, and PDO is going to be the library we're using to use our to deal with our database. Now that is installed in XAMPP by default, but that is a PHP extension that needs to be installed. So you may or may not have that installed on your server. So that's something you'd have to look into. I would say 99.9% of the time it's installed, and most of the times if it's not installed, you can usually just turn it on with a checkbox or something on the server settings and cPanel. But anyhow, let's go ahead and give this a namespace here. And this is going to be the same namespace as all of our other core files. So we're going to give it a namespace of core. The other thing that we're going to do here is let's go ahead and use some, I don't want to type out \PDO or \exception just in this one file. So what we're going to do is use, and we're going to put a \, and then we'll use a group here, and we'll use PDO, and we're going to end up using exception as well. All right, the other thing that we're going to do is we're going to create one more class that we're going to use here, and that's going to be our helper class. So we're going to use core \, and then well, we're going to use 2 out of this core. We need our config class. That's where we're going to get our database settings from. And then we're also going to use one called H, which will be a helpers class that we haven't created yet. All right, so I guess this is complaining and it's not going to let me do this. So go ahead now, I guess, and I'm not sure why we can't do this namespace thing here with this, but we'll just go ahead and get rid of that, I guess. So we'll use \PDO, and then we'll use \exception. I don't know why it doesn't like. We should be able to do that. Let me try one more time. Maybe I had a weird. I guess, I don't know. I guess we can't use PHP 7's namespace grouping if it's just a core deal here. So, or not core, but just root PHP class. But that's no problem. So we'll just leave it like that. The next thing we want to do is just define our class here by using the class keyword, and then we're going to use we're going to call it DB and open and close some curly braces. Let's go ahead and set up a few of the properties that we're going to need in this. So let's set up some protected properties. One of them is just going to be a DBH, which will be our database handler. Then let's have some results that will store the results of some queries in. We'll also do last insert ID, and then let's do row count. I'll set that equal to 0 by default. And then let's do one called fetch type, and we're going to set that equal to PDO, and that's a class called fetch. And now we have a few different ways to do this, but we want fetch underscore obj, which is object, and that's what's going to happen is we're going to get objects returned to us. And then let's go ahead and set up one called class, which I'll explain that later. You'll have to excuse my air conditioner, it is very hot in here. Hopefully it'll kick off soon. And we'll do error, and we'll set that equal to false by default. So that should be all the protected properties that we need in our class now. The other thing we want to do is go ahead and set up a protected static property, and this is going to be underscore DB. Now we're going to be using a pattern in this class called a Singleton Pattern, and the reason that we're going to do that is because we don't want to make multiple connections to the database. So what we'll do is we're going to store the connection of the database here, and if there is a database constructed, a database object constructed, we're just going to return this. If there's not, we'll create it, then return this. So that will be what's called a Singleton pattern, where there won't ever be more than one single database object instantiated. And the way we're going to do that is with a static method to determine if it's been instantiated, and then instantiated if it's not. So what we can do here is skip down a few lines here, and let's go ahead and create our constructor. So do public function. Now this is a built-in thing, it's 2 underscores, just like we've seen with all other classes here. And then let's just go ahead and set up some variables that we can use here just to make it a little bit easier. So let's set up a host, and then we're just going to use our config get, and then we had db host. Now we don't have to do this, we could just use config get db host, but that's a little long, so I'm just going to kind of shove them into some variables that we can use in this constructor just to make it a little bit easier to deal with. We'll do name, and it's the same thing, get config db name, and then we'll get our user, and that's going to be config get db user. And we also are going to need our password, and so I'm just going to call that pass, and we'll set that equal to config get db underscore password. Okay, now here's the thing, let's go and look at that config real quick. So open up config.php, and we're basically just getting these values from this configuration file. So there is a dependency upon this configuration file. So if you did want to use this DB in another project, you're going to need the config file as well. But that will allow you to put in your database host, name, user, and password for that environment that you're working on. Okay, so now that we have that, let's go ahead and set up a few options here. Now these options are available to us, and you can see this on PDO's documentation, but I just want to set a few things up as we're going to build this connection. So we have PDO attribute emulate prepares, and we're going to set that equal to false. All right, the next thing that we're going to do is set an option for attribute here, error mode. And what this is going to do is actually, if there's a DB error, it's going to return those DB errors as PDO error mode exception. So that will actually turn on errors in the form of exceptions that we can see from our database. The last one that we want to set here is PDO attribute, and this will be default fetch mode. So that option, and we will set that to PDO. And again, we're going to set this for fetch underscore object, just like that. All right, so yeah, that's all of these. This options, we're going to just pass this whole array, this options array, into our connection. So let's go ahead and do the connection really quick. And for that, let's use a try catch block. So we're going to say try, and then open and close some curly brackets, and then after the last closing curly bracket, we're going to do a catch, and we're going to catch the exception, and it's going to be stored in E. So that'll be stored in a variable called E, and then we're just going to throw new exception, and the message for that will be E get message, like that. Okay, so what's going to happen is we're going to do our connection in the try part, but if there's some sort of exception that's thrown, like our information's wrong or whatever, it will throw an exception. We'll be able to see that, and we're just going to get the get message there. Probably a little unnecessary, but I wanted to get a try catch block in here. And what we're going to do is set up the database handler. So in the try, we're going to say this underscore DBH is going to be equal to, and then we set up a new PDO object. Now this is the PDO object that we brought in up here, and this is going to be a built-in PDO or PHP thing for that extension that I was talking about. So this class already exists. So this we're instantiating a new PDO class here, and the way that works is the first parameter is going to have a lot of our connection information in it, and so we're going to tell it that we're using MySql, and then we're going to do a colon, and we're going to tell it our host is equal to, and then what we'll do here, let's use double quotes in here rather than single quotes, and then here let's just put in our host name like that. After the host, we're going to do a semicolon, and then we're going to tell it that the DB name is equal to, and then we'll do curly brackets here, and we'll pass in name. After that, we're going to go ahead and do semicolon there. Then what we're going to do is, that's the first, well, we don't need a semicolon actually here, but that's the first parameter. The next parameter is actually going to be the user and then the password. So the user, we'll just pass in user, and the next parameter is the password. So we'll pass in pass. And the last one is going to be our options array. So then we'll use our options array like that. So there's 4 parameters total. The first parameter is a mix of telling it what engine we're using. So we're using the MySql engine. We're telling it the host and the name of the database all in one string parameter there, which is a little confusing, but that's how they did it. And then we're telling it our user and is our next parameter, then our password. And then this is an optional thing, but we're going to pass in as options these options that we set up in that array. So that will actually instantiate our new database handler. All right, so after this constructor, we're going to create a new static method that's public that enables us to get this and use it. Because keep in mind that all these are protected, so we don't want anything outside of the class messing with this, but we do want to have access to it so that we can use it. So, and then this is also what's going to create the singleton pattern. So do public static function, and then let's just call it get instance. Okay, and this get instance is going to just do an if statement, and it's going to say if not self $_db, that's lowercase. So we're checking if that isn't set, and if it isn't set, we're going to say self $_db is equal to, and then what we could say is new self. So this is a little bit confusing, because what we're doing is we're checking right now. When you first just set this up, this is going to be null. This $_db is going to be null, so it's going to make it into this if statement. So then we're going to set that with this self db, and the reason we have to do this syntax is because it's static. Okay, and then we're going to say equals new self, which will run this constructor on the we could very well say, instead of new self, we could even say new db, but since we're already inside of that class, we don't have to do that. We could use the self keyword here, and that will instantiate this and set the instantiated object to a static variable or property rather in the class right here. And then at the end of this, all we're going to want to do here is return self $_db. So that's our entire get instance class, and this will actually connect to our database and set that database handler up and set the whole instantiated object to this $_db static property. So let's test that. Let's go jump over to our blog controller, and inside our index action at the top here, well, before we do that, we actually are going to have to bring in the db class. So right here in this use, just go ahead and type in db. We'll turn this into a group like that. So now we have db available to us. So inside our index action now, let's just say db is equal to, okay, and then we're going to say db : get instance. So in our application, we're going to get our database with this get instance, and that's the only way we're ever going to do it. And if we do it that way, we always do this, then it's going to provide a singleton method, because once that's set up, this will no longer make it into this if statement, and it'll just return it. Okay, so that is a singleton pattern there. And then let's just go ahead and save that, and let's navigate there. So if you just go to CMS, and you don't have to go anywhere because this actually goes to the blog index, and hit enter, and no news is good news here, so we can assume that the database connection is successful. Let's go break that to make sure. So if we go to the config.php, what I'm going to do here is put an extra s at the end of my database name, and I'll save that and go back. And now you can see we do get an exception thrown here, and it says that the unknown database CMSS it basically doesn't exist, and it tells us where it was thrown from, which was our core DB class. So since this wasn't happening before, we can assume that our database was that our connection details here were correct. Okay, so let's go back now and refresh. And now we got back to our page. So now we have access to this database connection in our blog controller right here with this DB. So what we're going to do is we're going to continue to build up functionality in our database class to do things like selection of data, inserting data, updating data, deleting data. We're going to add all that functionality and make sure that it's all escaped and using prepared statements to avoid SQL injection. So that's why our database class is pretty much going to exist, so that we can return things in a really efficient way without worrying too much about security, because we're going to set it all up in this class. Okay, so now we had talked a little bit about this. Well, we didn't talk about it yet, but we're going to build out a core class just called H, that's short for helpers, and we're going to throw some helper functions in there, or methods that we can use, and all of those are just going to be static methods. And the reason I'm doing that is just so we don't have a random helpers file with a bunch of functions in it. We're going to keep those just organized in that H class there. So let's go ahead and create that real quick. So in the core file here, right click on that and hit new file and hit h.php. And then here what we're going to do is open some PHP tags. We're going to namespace this to core. And then down here, let's just type class H, and then we can open and close some curly braces. And then we can start putting methods in here. So all these are going to be public static function. And then we're going to create one for dump and die. And it's going to take some data here. And we'll just go ahead and set that to an empty array, that's fine. And then open and close some curly brackets. And then what we're going to do here is just echo our pre-tag. And then we'll var dump our data. We're basically doing this for debugging purposes. This will give us the ability to do some var dumps really quick and put those in pre-tags. And then we are also going to die. Now what we could do, we could set up a second parameter here, and we could call that die, and we'll set that equal to true by default. Now if we ever want to just dump stuff and not die, then we can just pass false in as a second parameter. So instead of just dying here, let's go ahead and do an if statement, and we're going to say if die. Then we're going to just put die there, and that'll kill the application. But we'll have the ability to go ahead and echo with our pre-tags, and then we could set die to false if we want to use it in that way. So I'm going to just give myself a little bit of breathing room here just so I can see this method there. So now we have this public static function D&D. All right, so now what we can actually do if we want to is go back to our blog controller, and let's add our H right in here as well, because we're getting that from core. And right after our DB here, let's just try it. Let's try H : D&D, and we will put our DB in there. And if we go back, save, and go back and hit refresh, now you can see our database object. We have the DBH, which is a protected object, and it's our PDO object there. We have our results, our last insert ID. Now all this is protected or whatever, so not too useful information as of yet, but we're going to build this up, and it's going to be really awesome. And so let's go ahead and we'll just remove that. So now we know we have the ability to dump and die. Let's go ahead now and show what it looks like with the false. So I'm going to put false in there as a second parameter just to test that. And what it should do now is it does our dump and die, but it doesn't kill the application. So then the application is loaded afterwards. So now that's pretty cool, because now we have the ability, if we want to continue the application, because maybe we have multiple dumps that we want to do. That sounds really weird. Multiple dumps. I sound a lot Beavis and Butthead, but if we want to dump multiple objects or anything out, we can at one time without killing the application. So that's how we can do that. I'm gonna go ahead and close Bootstrap, as we don't need that right now. I'm gonna go back here now and just remove that dump and die for the moment, and refresh here, and everything's up and running. So I think what we'll do, let me see how long this video has been going so far. So we were at about 24 minutes. I think what I'm gonna do is we will call it quits now on this video, and in the next video we're going to set up our execute and query methods so that we can actually interact with the database. But now we've gotten our connection done, we've built our DB class, and we've also built our helpers class that we can use. Now we've only added one method into our helpers class, but that will grow as the application grows. All right, so let's go ahead now and go to Git and to our terminal here, and we'll make sure that we get everything pushed up. So I'm gonna do a git status here. All right, it shows me that I have a modified file and 2 new files that haven't been tracked yet. So we'll use git add dot to track those. Now if I do a git status, you can see that I have files here that are staged and ready to be committed. So let's do git commit -m, and we're gonna say on database connection. We'll hit enter, and then I'll do a git push, and now you guys will have access to that on my GitHub repo under the v13 branch. So now what I'm going to do is also I want to keep my main branch up to date, so I'm going to go ahead and git checkout main, and I'm going to merge that branch into main. So git merge v13, and I'll do a git push, and now the main is going to be always up to date with the full stack. So likely by the time you guys will see this, main will be different from v13. v13 will just be what we did and we left off with today on this video, but main will hopefully be a complete package, and you can see the entire application in the main branch. Alright guys, well that's it for this video. I hope you're enjoying it. Please comment, like, subscribe. If you want some awesome merch, head over to freeskills.life and you can get a hat or an awesome mug or something else. And that helps me out a little bit, but no worries if you can't do that. Just drop me a comment, let me know how you're enjoying this. I will see you guys in the next video.